My name is Svixer, and I come from Implement Consulting Group, where I am part of the data and analytics team. And I work mainly with generative AI. And I've done that ever since I joined 1.5 years ago. Before that, it was more like classical machine learning stuff, but then ChatGPT came and everything changed. So without further ado, let's get into it. Of course, the first slide I had to do was to create the Skylab using Midjourney. So I tried to do that. That's kind of the party trick nowadays. When we visit the clients or whatever, we try to make a personalized front page. We have a lot of fun with that. So this talk will be, of course, about generative AI. I will go kind of meta on it to start with. So how do we as consultants communicate generative AI? Which, I mean, it's something that's fairly complex. So how can we kind of communicate that to someone who doesn't really know about generative AI, but knows a lot about their business and wants to transform their business? So the first thing is to, of course, talk about what is it actually. So generative AI is a subcategory of artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is a technique or its methods to mimic human behavior. That's kind of the textbook definition, right? And inside of that we have machine learning, which is techniques or methods that uses data to solve some problem. So you're trying to learn from past events, really, to either predict or classify something. Then we have deep learning, which is more inspired by how the human brain works. This in turn means that we can model more complex data. So we're able to process pictures, audio, and stuff like that. Then we have generative AI. So it's based on many of these deep learning models. But what is it? What is it actually? Again, another textbook definition that can be nice to kind of refer to and go back to. But generative AI is algorithms that can be used to create new content, so new digital content. That can be text, as in the case of ChatGPT, but can also be Midjourney pictures, as the one that I created for the front page, and so on. And now we're also seeing a breakthrough in videos, and they're becoming better and better. But going back to text, so what really kind of shook the world was ChatGPT, which is a large language model. And when I talk to clients and my colleagues as well, actually, there is different understandings of what a large language model is. So if we're gonna kind of put it in simple terms, what it does, the language model, is that it tries to predict what is the most probable next word in a given sequence of words. And to kind of illustrate that, I have this little animation here. So action speaks louder than hair, no, trains, not house. Feelings getting closer, okay, words. So in this example, words were the most probable word, so the model chose that. And what we've seen with ChatGPT and other models alike is that these models are super powerful, and they can learn a lot of stuff, and they can learn many languages. So how do we kind of harness that power? That goes into what we call the alignment process. So you've probably all heard the phrase that ChatGPT, that's the whole internet, which to some extent is probably true. The model has read all of that content and kind of, gained its power from that. But how do we make the model useful? And some very clever guys at OpenAI figured that out. So what they did is they created what is referred to as instruction tuning. So they collected a lot of question and answer pairs from experts say a doctor comes in, he creates a question, and then he answers it the best way possible. In that way, the model gets deeper knowledge about some areas, and it also learns that it has to interact in a question-answer kind of instruction way. What also happens during this process is that there's a little reward model inside of this. So at the start of ChatGPT, you could make it say some pretty horrible stuff. So the model, there was put this kind of reward model on top to kind of say, okay, if you're racist, then you get a low score. And if you're polite and nice, then you get a high score. And that way, the model was aligned in a sense. And that made the model useful. So how is that going to change businesses? How is that going to change our lives? There's a pretty huge transformative potential, and there's this Gartner survey that says that almost all of the asked executives say that AI will be part of their strategy in the next 3 to 5 years. Then there's also an MIT study pointing to that 40% of our working hours will be impacted by using large language models. And that sounds pretty promising. So I think maybe some years ago it was mostly getting something from A to B that was first in line to be automated. Now it's actually knowledge workers like myself, and even more so consultants, because we just provide advice and knowledge, and maybe in 2 or 3 years you have a model that is called Implement Consulting Group, and that can do my job for me. In any case, we looked into these numbers in our generative AI team, and we did kind of a meta study on what is out there. So there has been done quite a few, randomized control trial best practice stuff, and what they show is that we're looking into a 32% increase in productivity. And then you might say, oh yeah, that's fine, we're going to do things faster, but that's gonna make the quality go down. But that's not what these studies suggest, actually. They suggest that we can increase the quality also of the work that we're doing. And just to mention, this is within written tasks, all of this. Good. So this sounds quite promising, and that is, again, that's the power of the models. So how can we, when we talk to clients, we want to, make them understand that we can harvest these benefits. And we sat down and we wanted to make like this kind of mental framework for how to interface with these models, or how to think about, how to create new functionalities. So we came up with this kind of MECE framework, and the first one is dialogue. So that's where you write something to the model, you prompt it, and you get some expertise back. This could be, for example, brainstorming sessions. The next one is generate content. That's where you provide the prompt to the model, and you get some content back. So you describe what it is that you want. Then we have the analyze content. That's where you provide some content, and you get expertise back. Simple example could be sentiment in the next mail you're sending to your boss. Might be a good idea. If you're pissed off, then you can get some help there. Then the last one, it's modified content. That's where you provide content and you get content back. And a cute little example I typically do when I'm out talking with clients that they're all business professionals. It is the LinkedIn example. So you might start with the dialogue. You ask the chat model, so what's the purpose of LinkedIn? What is it? Who owns it? And so on. And you find out that it's about promoting yourself and sounding very clever towards others. I think maybe some of you can recognize that. Then you ask the model to, can you please generate a LinkedIn post about generative AI that makes me sound super cool, and of course the model happily oblige. Then you want that to reach out to, I don't know, let's say the pharma industry. So you ask the model to kind of analyze it on how you can change it to be more specific to that area. Then lastly, you have a lot of, let's say, Spanish followers, so you ask the model to translate it, translate the post. So this is kind of the framework that we use when we go out to clients and wants to talk about, then how can you apply it in your business? This is a good starting point. Now the next slide, it's pretty busy, but please hold on. So this is kind of the process that we go through with our clients and also internally. And the first thing we do is that we try to find out what is the business domain and what is the focus. So we are looking into who are the right persons to involve in this, what are the aspirations of the company as a whole, of course, and the most important thing, we address where in the value chain for the company is it that we want to apply AI. So for a production company, they have a production facilities, they have some logistics, they have sales, and so on. So we invite all of these people, and then we ask them to identify where in the value chain there is the most value. And then we go on to the next step, which is the ideation. And that is where we also go into kind of the use case funnel that you see here. We start with all of these experts from the business that knows the business very well. We do brainstorming sessions. For example, taking or using this framework. So first we're thinking about how can we use the dialogue. Then we move on to the generate content and so on. And that's where we get a long list of use cases. So that might be 50 or 100 use cases. And when I say use cases, I mean, functionalities that could help them excel in their business. Then we move on to the qualify and prioritize, which is where we look more deeply into each use case. So, for example, is it viable? How much do you want it, and how much impact does it create for you? And then this is also the step where we as consultants become, quite valuable, because we're looking then into the solution architecture of such a generative AI solution. And that could, for example, be, is it prompt-based? Can we solve this by prompting? Do we need to put some clever logic on top of that? Do we need to build what is called retrieval augmented generation, which is a way of forcing the model to only look in your internal data? So there are many different things that you can do. Then we move on to the last phase, which is where we prioritize the use cases, and we sometimes do that with actually tape on the floor, a 4x4 matrix where you have impact going up from low to high, and we have feasibility from low to high as well. And then we take our index cards. I don't know if you know Implement Consulting Group, but we are very famous for our index cards that we write, and the other consultants call us the index card consultancy, which is fine. But anyway, then we make the people from the business, we make them kind of fight on where should we put these index cards in this matrix. And then, of course, the last step is when you have prioritized, you move on to creating proof of concepts, and that's the most funny, I would say, for me at least. So this is where we dig deep into the Python code. We create some solution that solves a business problem. And to exemplify that, I'm currently working on a very exciting project for a large, it's like multinational company that creates machinery, and that machinery is controlled by software, and that software is made with C++ code. and they need to run through all of that code. So it's millions of lines of code, and that code needs to live up to some rules, very specific rules, rules that you cannot catch because the code will execute. But it can have fatal. It can be fatal in the machinery. So that's where we thought, okay, let's try out using a GPT model to go through the code. And so that's, for example, a nice example of how to use it. And then hopefully, as we see how this functionality works, we can move on to the last phase in that current project, which is trying to build the most viable product or minimum viable product. And we would like to, of course, incorporate it into their IT infrastructure. All right. So building these solutions, what's kind of the big difference between traditional AI and generative AI? And it's quite big. So traditional AI, you start with getting the data, cleaning it, labeling it, building the model. In generative AI, you just start with the model, which is nowadays most of the time just GPT-4 because it's so capable and so powerful. Then the iteration times can be months, even years. You have to really get the right data. You have to optimize the parameters of the model, doing large grid search that takes forever. In generative AI, you can even just start with going to ChatGPT and see, does this functionality work? And then you'll have a yes or no, and then you can kind of build from there. In traditional AI, also you build solutions where it's kind of hard to see the value in the start. Whereas here, it's as I said, it's very easy to validate the new solutions that you come up with. And traditional AI, you also have very specific models for specific stuff. So some models can identify whether it's a blueberry muffin or it's a chihuahua. Then you have models that can predict certain stuff. Whereas in generative AI, you have a model that can do pretty much anything. And it's getting even more and more capable. If some of you have the ChatGPT Plus subscription, you might have seen that now you can paste pictures to the model and chat with the pictures. You can also make it generate pictures. They even added the voice functionality, so you're able to chat with the model by words, of course. So these modalities are getting kind of everywhere, built into these language models. Then model quality. In traditional AI, typically a 1 or a 0. Was this prediction correct? Yes, no. With generative AI, it's kind of a lot harder, actually, to look at this. So the time spent developing the solution is kind of shifting towards validating the model. Because it's, as we talked about earlier, it's just next word prediction, which also means that the models are stochastic. So what it finds to be the most probable word the first time might not be the same word the second time. So a lot of time is now going into validating the solutions. Traditional AI is typically driven by top-down. So we have a CFO who wants to optimize something. Then he goes to his data and analytics team and says, can we do this? He talks to some data scientists, and then we kind of get the ball rolling. Generative AI were, at least in the start of ChatGPT, fueled from bottom up. So anybody could use the tool, and a lot of people were using the tool to summarize emails, meeting notes, taking your meeting notes and just pasting them into ChatGPT, say, please make sense of this. And that's kind of onboarded organizations from the bottom up. Now, the last thing I will touch upon is then how can we build an AI strategy. And of course, finding the use cases is instrumental to that. But first, we're looking at how is this fitting into the overall strategy, the IT strategy, the infrastructure, and also data strategy. Now I know I have only 1 minute left, so what I will just quickly say is that finding the right use cases, that's what really can create value for businesses. And also for you, if you have some use cases, go try it out. That's the right way to start, at least in my perspective. And then for companies as a whole, I would say the box called data enablers, that's also getting more and more important. Because if you don't have the right governance of your data, if you don't know where to find it, then how are you going to use generative AI or AI to kind of activate that data? We've seen that ourselves. We're currently implementing the Microsoft Copilot into our company, and it can be quite of a mess if you don't have control over your data. So the data management aspect of AI is certainly being highlighted. Yeah, I think that's it. And now it's time for you to ask some questions.
Yeah, thank you. So let's see if we have some questions in the house first. Anyone have a burning question? Otherwise, I can open the floor. You touched upon the implementation of Microsoft Copilots and these enablers. If anyone is sitting out there, maybe viewing us online right now, thinking, "Oh, we want to do as a Microsoft Copilot," what are things that they should think about?
I think I will just start by saying something, and then I'll answer the question. So I think a huge trend in generative AI currently is that we're going to see copilots in everything. So whether that being Microsoft or some ERP system or even Google Chrome, whatever. So I mean, it's something that's coming to stay. And then on kind of enabling that or activating that into your business, I think the most critical part is having a good and structured way that you're doing data management and data governance. Because if you're kind of if you're just putting Microsoft Copilot, if you're letting that loose into your system, it will find a lot of things. So I might write to my Copilot, what's the salary of CEO Niels Arngot? And it might be able to find that because the access and security has not been set up probably. So I would say that's probably the largest thing right now. So like data governance, data management, and this kind of knowledge management as well. Because if you have some documents about, I don't know, something that's IP, something that's important to the company, then you might have it in 7 different versions, and you might have it half of it laying around somewhere, and so it could also create some kind of not misinformation, but it might not be the right thing that you're finding.
Yeah. So it's like creating a collective brain in the organization,
exactly.
And you don't want everybody to be able to look into everything.
Yeah, and I guess that goes both traditional AI, generative AI, garbage in, garbage out. So, yeah.
So true. Let's see if it sparked some. We have a question down here.
Thank you very much for the talk, Victor. I have a question regarding what kind of industry or companies are you seeing that are most willing to move in the direction of implementing AI in their work, and which are hesitating?
I think it's what I've seen right now is mostly companies that are market leaders or companies that are doing quite well because they have kind of the surplus, they have the energy to actually go after this, and And then also I would say companies that have traditions in R&D, because they know that if you invest in something early, adopt new technologies, there might be a huge benefit. That I would say, yeah. It's not. I cannot say that a typical industry is doing it more than another industry, but definitely helps having this kind of trial and error culture in your company. Yeah.
Any questions online?
We do have one. Now I'm just reading out what the person wrote. Like, what techniques do you see or do you use to qualify and prioritize? So I think it's more how can you make a quality proof whatever the model comes out with.
Yeah. So that's where you have to kind of engineer your way through it and make a structured approach. So we have been working quite extensively with trying to, or using a lot of time on building the validation flow for solutions. So, I mean, for me, it's not to brag or anything, but it's fairly easy to set up a GPT model, instruct it to something, build some logic on top, and then you shoot it into Microsoft Azure, and then it's out there. But the hard part is the validation flow, and that's where you have to kind of make for whatever each use case it is. You have to be very methodical about how you validate the model, and set up a flow that makes sense in that case. So I think a lot of, from traditional AI, you spend a lot of time on creating the model, not so much on validating because it's 0 or 1. Whereas generative AI, you create the solution fairly easy, but then you have to keep validating it to make sure that it's not hallucinating and having biases and all of those things that is possible for these models.
And how do you do that?
One of the things that is quite the hype right now is to build something called retrieval augmented generation. So that's where you take a collection of documents, can be up to whatever documents. I built a solution once that were 3,000 documents, and there were over 1 million pages in total. Then you store that in a database, and for the nerds, what you do is you create embeddings of the documents, and then you store them in a vector database. Then you're able to, so when you chat with the model are only allowed to look into that database. So you kind of, the model is not allowed to draw on the latent knowledge it has, but it's supposed to be looking inside the database. So that's one way of providing the right context to the model. And then you're able to harness the power that it has for, summarization or synthesizing or what it might be. So that's one of the ways of doing it. Then we're also seeing, I don't know how much time I have, but I can keep talking a lot. But
We have one more question.
yeah, sure. Then let's do that. Yeah. Sure.
How do you ensure privacy and safety when using the models from free source? And what is the price for privacy? That's a question.
Yeah, good question. I would say to answer the first part, most of the clients I have worked with, they're all using Microsoft, as many organizations are. And Microsoft, as you know, or might not know, they bought half of OpenAI. So their models are within Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud platform. So you're able to get a private endpoint to a model, where you get the same security as you would storing your documents on SharePoint. So that's the first point. Of course, all of the solutions that we build would be inside such an environment. The price for that is, actually the same price as OpenAI. Then of course you are dependent on Microsoft, right? But if you are that in any case, then I don't see a huge problem. the IP or the documents you have, they are safe within that environment. And then if we're looking into more like Copilot stuff and that, then the licenses, I think it's around $30 for one user. So that can be quite expensive. But again, if you're able to harvest 40% or 32% productivity, then it might be worth it. Then on the other side, there is the thing where you want to build your own models. You want to train them from scratch. You can do that as well. But as it is right now, the pace of development, when you're done training your model, there's a new, more capable model. And then you spend 500,000 on a huge GPU cluster. So that might not be worth it. But it is something that we'll see in the future, I think. I hope that's answering the question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.